Hi, everybody. I'm back on the stage. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight in person and online. Are you ready to have some fun? I hope so. My name is Lucy Donnelly, and I'm a Reader Services Librarian here at Kansas City Public Library, which means my job is book, and you're in the right place if you like them. So yeah, I know it's a pretty fun job, but tonight I'll be joined on stage with 4 other librarians who are going to share their book selections for all of you tonight. And they'll make great gifts all year long, I promise. Please help me welcome to the stage Gabby Miller, the Assistant Branch Manager at the Lucille H. Bluford Branch. Hi, Gabby. Hello. You have a microphone.
Yeah, I see.
Perfect. Yeah. She brought visual aids. Hey. So, Gabby.
What's up, everybody?
Lively bunch we have.
Yeah.
What's your favorite genre that you like to read and suggest to people, and why?
I love to read young adult novels. Kind of takes me back to my days as a teen librarian, but it also takes me back to the days when I was a teen. And there's just something so great about young adult novels. First of all, there's some incredible authors, and I feel like young adult literature is having a moment. It's been having a moment in the last 5 or so years of just incredible authors just coming up, like Jason Reynolds and Nick Stone. Well, Jacqueline Woodson is a classic, but she writes a lot of young adult novels as well. And I could go on and on about all different authors, but they're just really, it's really just an incredible genre that shows the experience of teens today. And there's just a lot of experiences that as an adult you kind of forget about. You know, you forget about your first kiss or what it was like when you were around a new group of people, moving to a new neighborhood, that kind of thing. And it's just really refreshing to just hear those perspectives from young people these days.
Ace. So we're here tonight to share some titles. What you got for me?
Yeah, so I'm a visual person, so I brought them with me today. These are all books you can borrow at the KC Public Library. The first one is called Slay, and it's written by Brittany Morris. It's about a young girl. She's about 17, I think, and she is in high school, and she's very, very intelligent. She is actually a game programmer, a game designer, and she's created a whole online game that uses VR technology, and it's a secret society of gamers that use this game, and you have to be invited to attend. This is a great book for people who really like Black Panther, or people who really like stories, true life kind of stories. This secret society of a secret game is actually featuring individuals and themes of Black culture. So, for example, there's little battles that each character takes, like in certain environments, like in the desert and in all kinds of environments. And basically these special attack cards that they use have that Black culture theme. There's a special card that's called Purple Haze, and it's a nod to Jimi Hendrix. And each attack, each Purple Haze attack, sends a purple haze on the battleground. There's one that's called a Twist Out, and it's the character basically uses their textured hair to send an attack. It's pretty exciting. And there's a really big plot twist in that there is a troll on this game platform that is trying to take it down because of what it stands for, which is to empower people of color. So it's a great one. I also have,
I'm a sucker for a video game story whenever possible.
and they're not very common either. Like,
No.
you know, it's hard to write about gaming because it's
Yeah.
such a visual thing. But it was really great. I also have Sadie, which is a really awesome book. If you like Murders in the Building, you would love this book. Only Murders in the Building, you know, if anybody's ever heard of it, is a mystery type show that has, you know, a podcast element to it. And that's kind of what Sadie is like. You're actually reading the book, and it's got a podcast narrative. There's a guy, Wes, and he is basically trying to track down this young girl named Sadie. She's disappeared. It seems like she's a runaway. There's something strange about it, but she is chasing after the person who murdered her younger sister. So it's kind of a thriller, but a mystery, and there's a lot of twists and turns, and I definitely couldn't put it down when I was reading it.
Which is perfect for this time of the year when you're snowed in.
Yeah. Solito. This one is not quite a teen novel. It technically is an adult novel, but it does feature a 9-year-old boy named Javier, and it's told from his perspective. It's about this boy. It's a true story. Javier was born and grew up in El Salvador, and his family lives in El Salvador, but his parents crossed the border into the U.S., and they're living in California, and this is around the 90s. So it talks about his journey from El Salvador by himself, and that's what Solito stands for. It's solo, like alone. And he travels with the assistance of coyotes that were hired to help individuals cross into the U.S. So it kind of shows how folks like Javier and others who cross into the U.S. Really have a lot of dangers and challenges coming over here in that way. But it's something where he wanted to be with his family, and he was feeling like he didn't want to live in El Salvador without them. So it was a dangerous journey, though. And if anybody has ever read about coyotes, like they can be pretty brutal. They take you through like on boats and through the desert with no water. It's very nerve-wracking, and it's a story of survival for sure. And speaking of a story of survival, Dry is kind of like takes place in the near future. This one's written by Neil Schusterman and his son Jared Schusterman. And in this book, it's told by a couple different individuals, a brother and a sister, Alyssa and I know this. Kelton. Kelton is her brother. And they are, if you've ever heard of, or if you've ever experienced a situation where there's a drought and you can't use water. I'm from California, that happened all the time. And so it was kind of a scary situation, but this is to the extreme, where there's no more water available to this community. And so these two teens are waiting for their parents to come back because their parents left to find water. And Alyssa, the older sister, has to make a decision of, am I going to go find my parents, or am I going to go find water, or am I going to stay here and hope that they come back? And she decides to take her brother, and they make a journey to figure out where they can find water. And they have some leads, and they meet some people along the way. It's a story of survival. It's a really great read as well. And that's all I got for you.
You got from me, that's good. I love a good cli-fi, is what it's called, climate fiction. A little bit of a sci-fi twist to things, but it basically just makes you ponder, what would you do if like the environment really does truly collapse? This one really intrigued me when you submitted it. I was like, I was gonna have to go on my to-be read list next year. Like, it's just such a good stuff.
Yeah. And I did throw in another one. This one technically isn't a young adult read. It's an adult read by the ever-famous James Patterson. If you haven't heard of Run, Rose, Run, this is really awesome as an audiobook because it's co-written by Dolly Parton, and she is part of the audiobook cast. Kelsey Ballerini is also on the audiobook, and it's about a girl who wants to basically achieve stardom, and she's a musician, and she's trying to make it in Nashville. And so Dolly Parton kind of becomes her fairy godmother. But yeah.
Which we all wish she would be.
Yeah.
And in your little pamphlets, there's another Dolly Parton book because we couldn't help ourselves. It's called Behind the Seams, and it's a beautiful coffee table book all about her fashion through her career period. So you want to get some Q&A?
Sure.
So if you guys have any questions or need more suggestions, we are here, and we'll have a little bit of time that you can ask Gabby and myself before we move on to our next segment. Yeah.
That book that you were just talking about with Dow, is that in here?
It is not in there, but it is on the list online, which you can scan on the QR code on the front. No, you're fine. That's a good question. Okay.
So I always like to get current young adult recommendations based on favorites from the past. I feel like that's a good way to find something that, you'll like, or maybe a teen in your life would like. So one of my favorites from my childhood is A Ring of Endless Light by Madeline L'Engle, and I was curious, I don't know if you've read it. There's dolphins, slight magic. Madeline L'Engle is the GOAT, so, I was curious if you have any light sci-fi young adult recommendations.
A good one. Way to stump us a little bit at the get-go.
You can think about it.
Right? Well, you're at an advantage because there's definitely a point right now in publishing where they like to do soft everything. So soft fantasy, soft sci-fi, cozy things. So
Well, and maybe anything cozy.
anything cozy?
Sure. We'll open it up.
Book.
It's hard because a lot of teen novels feature angst, and that's kind of what teens are going through right now. They have a lot of emotions. And
There is plenty
With-
of angst
with
in the
cozy-
Ring of Endless Light.
Yes.
yeah, with cozy reads for teens, I just can't picture.
I have a cozy graphic novel,
Perfect.
Pumpkinheads. It is perfect read for the fall because it's two teenagers working at a pumpkin patch, fall festival kind of thing, and they've been friends all 4 years of high school. Feelings may have developed, and artistically, you just feel like you're at the pumpkin patch with them. And they're working on opposite sides of the pumpkin patch for the final day of the year, and they have to make sure that they tell each other that they like each other. And it's just, I read it in one sitting. It is so cute. I am blanking right now on who the author is, but that happens.
I think it's Rainbow Rowell, but it
I think so,
sounds
too.
great.
I wanted to say that, but I was like, I am second guessing myself right now.
Thank you. I will definitely check it out.
Yeah.
We have a question from online.
Oh.
Yes. Would the first book you described, Slay,
Yeah.
be a good for fans of the holiday horror film Krampus?
True confession, I haven't seen Krampus. I wouldn't put them in the same category though, because Slay is more of a kind of slice of life story. It's kind of has a STEM piece to it. Krampus, I know, is a horror/comedy, so I wouldn't recommend Krampus for or a Krampus pairing with Slay. There are quite a number of scary novels in the teen collection. The one that I can think of that might be a good pairing, there's a whole series of like Five Nights at Freddy's, which is a really popular franchise that was turned into a movie and graphic novels and books, and it's by Cawthorne is the last name. But it's basically, if you think of like going to Chuck E. Cheese and there's those animatronic characters, kind of makes them scary. And they come alive at night and they chase you down, and it's terrifying. So the whole premise is somebody is having to keep an eye on them to make sure that they don't do anything at night that they shouldn't.
Yeah. I think we've had Gabby sit in the hot spot for long enough. Thank you again so much for joining me up here. Let's give Gabby a round of applause. Next to join me in the hot spot is going to be Diana Platt. She is our inevitably wonderful digital librarian. She works in our collection development department, and she is honoring us with some narrative nonfiction selections. Why did you pick narrative nonfiction?
So I love a good nonfiction book, and I actually used to think they were super boring until I picked up the most amazing book, which is not what I'm here to talk about, but it's called Assassination Vacation by Sarah Vowell, and it changed the entire way I look at nonfiction books. Okay. This was like when I was in college, and I've never looked back. So narrative nonfiction is the way to go if you think you don't like nonfiction. So I tried to pick things that are very high interest, that read kind of like novels, that are lots of fun. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about what I brought today.
Yay! And so just really fast, when you say narrative nonfiction, we're specifically talking about nonfiction, so real life books that are more conversational in style or more like a story being told.
Yeah, it's like a story as opposed to here's the facts, here's the next fact, here's the next fact.
Yeah.
There is a story pulling all these facts together.
Cool.
And I think the perfect book to talk about first for that is going to be Cue the Sun by Emily Nussbaum. This book is the story of reality TV, and we all think reality TV is what it is today. Reality TV has actually been around since the days of radio, so this is a perfect book for anybody you know who loves The Real Housewives, who loves any kind of reality TV, but also anyone you know who loves to hate on reality TV, because it's talking a lot about like the scandals of it and why it's not necessarily great for society and why we still love it and why it's so popular. So I'm gonna give this to so many people because even though it's quite a thick book, I'm halfway through it and I've only had it for like 2 days. So I am really loving this. I'm learning so much. Like, did you know that Candid Camera was originally a radio show? Who knew? And the guy who created it, like, got his hands on military-grade recording equipment after the Second World War and decided, wouldn't it be funny if I pretended to do things and saw what happened, how people reacted to it, and just recorded it. And, like, he was a soldier, so he had access to this recording equipment, and that's like the birth of modern reality TV. It's all the way back at the end of World War II. So it's been really interesting to read. I'm all the way up to like the 90s and cops and things like that, and I can't wait to see what else she has to say about reality TV.
And it looks like it's a good pick if your readers always have to have a prize in their hand, because it won a Pulitzer.
Yes. Emily Nussbaum is a writer for The New Yorker. Yeah, The New Yorker. And so she's basically a TV critic. And she did win the Pulitzer for this, so this is a great one for anybody you know who's like an NPR fan, a New Yorker fan. If they've got one of those tote bags that they carry all their stuff in, they'll really love this book.
Nice.
If you've got somebody who's a little bit more outdoorsy, maybe, here's an alternative pick, which is going to be A Walk in the Park by Kevin Fedark. This book is about his attempt to walk the entire length of the Grand Canyon. It ended up taking him over a year to do it because it's such an arduous hike. So if you have somebody in your life who is a big fan of national parks or outdoors activities, hiking, etc., or maybe somebody who just likes to read about those things or adventures, this is a great pick for them. Maybe this one will go to my dad and the other one will go to my mom. You know what I mean?
Definitely good for people who like the idea of doing the activity, but maybe like the safety of their own home instead.
Yeah, that'd be me.
Me too.
I did bring some ideas for the kids and teens in your life. The first one I want to talk about is The Mona Lisa Vanishes, which is by Nicholas Day. The reason I picked this one is that it is a true story about the theft of the Mona Lisa back around the turn of the, it was like, what was it, 1910?
Yeah.
Where they stole the Mona Lisa, and he writes it like a thriller, and he intersperses the story of the theft with the story of the creation of the Mona Lisa. If you don't know, essentially the Mona Lisa was stolen at the turn of the century and then recovered later, but that's why the Mona Lisa is so famous today. It was really kind of an unremarkable painting before that time, and it became kind of like this celebrity painting after it was stolen and recovered. So this book is also illustrated by Brett Helquist, who, if you're not familiar, he narrates a ton of really popular children's books. And most famously, he narrated all of the books in A Series of Unfortunate Events, which has now been movies and TV shows and has spin-off books, etc. So if you've got a kid who loves any of the other books that are narrated by that author, I think you can take it, or by that, that are illustrated by that illustrator, it's a pretty good guess that they'd probably like this one too, because it does read like an adventure story, like a thriller. It'll keep their attention really well.
Sounds fabulous. I'll have to add that to my reading list.
Yeah, I know. And then if you have a kid or a teen, or really even an adult who is interested in World War II, I highly recommend The Enigma Girls by Candace Fleming. This is, of course, about the girls who worked at Bletchley Park during World War II in England. They recruited young women all the way into teenagers to be code breakers during the war. And this is the true story of how they picked those girls, what their lives were like. There's photos and different kinds of puzzles that they might have solved, codes they might have broken. It's super interesting. And World War II books are one of those things that a lot of people really love, novels about World War II. So this would be a great supplement for just about anybody you know who loves those books. Like,
I would say this would have been a great book for me as a child because I was obsessed with World War II, but everything was about the dudes. Yes. And I was like, well, I don't really see myself in this story. But it's definitely like, has everybody seen The Imitation Game? Maybe?
Yeah, it's like
they crack the code because of one of these girls who's like, the guy who counters me on the German side is talking to his girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And it's just like that intellectual ability to like see what's going on within the codes is just so fascinating.
And also, like, women have a different insight into things than men, whereas a man would be like, what is this crazy military thing they're talking about, when really he's talking about his date last night. Yeah. And a man might not necessarily realize that, but women are like, he's totally talking about a girl. Like, or maybe it's code for something else, but yeah. Big fan of this book. And finally, I want to talk about something that's a little bit offbeat. That's a great gift for that offbeat person in your life. This is the book that I hope somebody buys me for Christmas. This is called Spooky Lakes, and it is a picture book. It is written by a geologist named Geo Rutherford, which, what a great name for a geologist, right? Yes. And every October on TikTok, she has a series called Spooky Lake Month, where every day in October she talks about a different lake or water feature or natural or man-made water feature that is spooky for one reason or another. The Yellowstone calderas are very spooky because they can boil you alive in a matter of seconds. So she tells the story of each of these different lakes. She has like a 4-page spread dedicated to all the crazy things that have happened at Lake Michigan. She does illustrate this book herself. She is a beautiful artist. So this picture book is a great pick for anybody who likes science, who likes ghost stories, who likes nature mysteries, and it's just really beautiful. It would make a great coffee table book, hint, hint to my family. But it would also be a great gift if you have a kid in your life who kind of likes creepy things. Like a lot of kids are really interested in ghost stories and creepy things. I think this would be a great pick for them as well. Even though it is a picture book, it does have a lot of text, so probably not for a super young kid unless you want to read it all to them. But it's just a really beautiful piece of art in a picture book form. Again, that's Spooky Lakes by Geo Rutherford.
It's also just a helpful reminder that there is no age, for the most part, to books. So you can be an adult reading a picture book, you can be a kid reading a full-length novel. Like, it's just a reminder that books are for everyone at all age ranges. And even though it's marketed towards kids, I want it. That's beautiful. I want to hear about spooky things all the time.
Exactly.
Nice. So we have her in the hot spot. Do you guys have any questions? Some narrative nonfiction suggestions you want to help solve? Yes.
Oh yeah, that's called Enigma Girls.
By Candace Fleming.
And that is in your handouts, I think.
I think it is. If not, it is on the full list online. We had too many books. We couldn't fit them all in the printout. I'm sorry? Yes.
Yes, narrative nonfiction.
Yep. Yes, it is.
It's a little bit more amorphous than some because things can be narrative nonfiction and a history book, or narrative nonfiction and pop culture.
Yeah.
So different places might like classify them different ways.
Yeah. It's definitely a blendy and moldable genre to be able to use to describe other things. Like, there are some true crime books that are not narrative nonfiction, and others that are very much narrative nonfiction.
There are lots of great lists online that talk about the best narrative nonfiction of the year, the best narrative nonfiction of all time, things like that. So if you also go in and talk to your librarian, they'll be able to help you find it, ones that suit your taste as well.
Absolutely. And you can submit a gift shelf help and tell us that's the kind of nonfiction you're looking for, and we'll curate a list of 10 titles that fit that. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diana, for joining me. Give Diana a round of applause. Next, I will be joined on stage by Ruby Jones. She is our Manager of Information and Reference Services at our Central Branch, and she's a lover of all things creepy and spooky. And she's going to talk to us about horror. Why do you like horror?
So when I tell people I love horror, but the first reaction is like, why? Like, why do you like, reading about dark and depressing or scary things? And to me, I wasn't always into horror, but something that drew me to it was that it actually helps me to focus on the good things in my life, like when there are scary things. And I also like that feeling of being alive, because it gets your pulse going and you get you just feel more alive. At least I do when you get into a really good scary book. And you also find what kind of what your, not necessarily your weaknesses are, but like the things that, that you are afraid of, and then you learn to face them. And that's the sort of thing that I just love reading to feel alive.
Yeah, I would also say there's a flavor of horror for everyone.
This is true.
I am like a massive cozy reader, but there are some darkly humorous horror books out there that have really caught my attention that I was just like, I couldn't put them down.
Yeah. Whenever somebody says that they're not really into horror, I always tell them, well, I don't think you've just found the right horror for you yet. because there is a ton of different ones. You can go way deep into the dark horror, or you can stay into the light, soft, funny horror. So there's humorous horror as well. So
Yeah, like Grady Hendrix,
Yes.
king of the funny.
he is. He's super funny. Anybody that enjoys like a little bit of humor but quirkiness, I would suggest Grady Hendrix. He wrote a book. It's not in the list, but it's called Horror Store, and he wrote the book with the format of an IKEA catalog. So the beginning of each chapter has this really cool graphic of like an illustration like you would find in an IKEA catalog, and then like it's about a bunch of teens that try to spend overnight in like an IKEA store, but not really, and then something really spooky happens, and of course all the electricity goes out, and people go missing. It's that sort of thing, but it's fun and light, and it doesn't get too scary ever. So Grady Hendrix is a great entry point if you're looking for horror starters.
Absolutely. What you got for me?
So the first book I'm going to talk to you about actually isn't, I wasn't able to get a copy of it, but it's called House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. And it's a shame that I didn't get a copy because that was one of the first books that really brought me into horror. Mark Danielewski plays a lot with formatting. He plays a lot with text, orientation of that text, fonts, color, illustration. So it's really dynamic reading. And it's a good thing because the book is like a big honker of a book. Like you can be easily intimidated by it, but I tell people don't get intimidated by it. So the story is about a man. Okay, you're gonna have to follow me on this. It's a man who finds it's a book about a man who finds a book. And that book is a description of a documentary film about a photographer who moves into this house with his family, and he discovers that the house is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So he's moving into this house, and as you do, you're like wandering around looking at all the doors where they lead and stuff. And one of the doors he opens, and it opens into this hallway. And he's like, well, that's weird. He looks out the window that's like right next to the door, and it leads to like the outside. He's like, there should be a hallway here. So he ends up measuring it out, the whole house. He measures the whole house out, and the measurements are off from the outside, from the inside measurements by like the most tiniest measurement, like half an inch or something. And so he, of course, opens this door that leads down this dark black hallway, and it's basically where light goes to die. Like there's no way they have a fire or a flame or a light. There's no light in there. So of course, naturally, in a horror book, you take a bunch of people, you get them together, and you go down this dark hallway, because why not? And in the journey, they discover that this house is way huger than what it's supposed to be, and there is dark evil that lives inside. And again, all of this happens while the author is playing with formats, and there's two authors, but then there's also the documentary that he's describing, so that each character has a different font, so you can kind of follow along. And he also uses footnotes and things like that. So this book is really good for somebody who is really up for a challenge and kind of likes, doesn't mind like textbook feel. And you can get really deep into this because like the footnotes lead you off into literary references. They lead you off to, like you can, depending on how much effort you want to put into reading this, you could get really lost into it. There's also like a soundtrack that accompanies it. So it's a whole thing. And like if you look this up on the internet, there's like people that dedicate their like reading, lives to this. But if you just want to read it for what it is, it's a really great story. And the format also helps you feel like claustrophobic and stuff. It's like so cool how it all like plays together to like give you this feeling of doom and like dread and like unknown. It's the best feeling. So
Sounds very immersive.
it totally is. It totally is an immersive read. So the next book I have is, was this published this year? I think it was.
Yeah.
It's called The Eyes Are the Best Part. I think the cover is the best part. The author's Monica Kim. She's a debut author. This book is a good book for, I think, for strong feminist readers who are looking for something with a strong female lead. So this book is about a young Korean girl who her parents are divorcing, and then the father just goes off because he's met somebody else. And so the mom, her mother, ends up finding this other man, younger man to be with. And so there's a weird dynamic, and something happens in the main character, and I forgot her name. But something happens that triggers her one day, and she finds herself craving eating the eyes of a fish, like you know how they do, like it's a culinary thing. But then soon that fish eye is not satisfying to her anymore. She craves something more. So then she starts, tracking out men and following them, and she, I don't give anything away, but she does kill a couple guys in here, and she does eat their eyes. So there is cannibalism in this story, but the way the author describes eating the eyeballs, it was so vivid and intense, and I just loved it. You could feel the pop. I don't know, it was just so cool I've never read anything quite so ooh, that was good. But
Only if you have a strong stomach.
yeah. It's not in the cookbook section. You could possibly take some tips from it. But yeah, it was a great read, and it was fast too. It's not that long, so if you're looking for something to move quickly through, that's a good read.
It's also a book that librarians across the country can't stop talking about, so you know it's good.
Yeah, well written. So the next book I have is The Indifferent Stars Above by Daniel James Brown. And this is my audio pick, so I haven't read the book. I listened to the audio. So in listening to the audio, I would recommend this book for people who love Ken Burns documentaries, because that's the vibe I was getting, so PBS Ken Burns. So I don't know, keeping with the cannibalism vibe.
It's on trend.
It is on trend. It's so hot right now. I didn't know a whole lot before going into this about the Donner Party, other than that it wasn't good. People were eaten and bad stuff happened. And that was all I knew of the Donner Party, right? All the culture references and that sort of thing. But this is the author that wrote The Boys in the Boat, so if you're familiar with that, I guess he writes narrative fiction. Not narrative nonfiction. But he really breaks it down into what exactly happened through that whole trip, and holy cow, it is quite traumatic. I did not realize quite how many children were on this trip. So again, if you don't have a strong stomach, I don't recommend you reading this, but it was very moving to me. And I don't normally read nonfiction, but I just wanted to try something different. And again, I knew about the Donner Party, but I wanted to know a little bit more. So it kept my attention through the whole thing. And the audio, I forget who reads the audio, but he's also done some other historical audio. So yeah, I liked it for people who enjoy Ken Burns documentary style type stuff.
Yeah, if you want to go to the darker side of history, it's a good one to pick up.
Yeah. My next pick, I'm going to do this one. So I brought my own personal purchased library copy of this book because librarians are people too, and I spilt some water on it, and it got soaked, so I ended up having to pay for the copy from the library, which was okay because I loved this book so much. So this book is called Winterset Hollow by Jonathan Edward Durham. And the way I like to sell this book is, imagine if you read a book when you were young and it was so formative to your development that it stuck with you. You love it, you read it every year, it's fantasy, right? The characters are a rabbit, a frog, and I think a fox. And so the main character has this book, he reads it every year, he loves it, one day he discovers that there is an island out there where these characters live in real life, like they actually exist, like this frog, this rabbit, and this fox.
What could go wrong?
Right? It sounds great, right? Like it sounds like, oh yeah, that's so awesome, Disneyland, right? So he buys himself a ticket on this boat, he heads out there. But then something happens that he didn't quite expect. So he sees this house. He goes with this tour group, but he gets separated from them somehow. I don't quite remember how. But he finds this house in the middle of nowhere. And so like you do in a horror book, you go up and you peek through the window and start knocking on the door. And so then he discovers that the characters are actually living. But in the book this is again a book about a book. So he discovers that the barley day that they talk about in the book that he loves is not actually a good thing. Barley day is actually a day of hunting. So take that with what you will. And the boat comes here every year and brings people. And so it becomes this hunting thing. And so it becomes very dark, and he discovers that the characters are not quite what he thought they would be. And so then I think one of the taglines, and I loved it, it was like, what do you do on barley day? You run, friend, you run. So it becomes this he's being hunted by people. And so I would recommend this to people who are up for an adventure. Also, there is some body horror in here. It's not light horror, but it is unique in the horror world. I have not come across quite this sort of concept, so I just loved the idea. And if you're on social media, the author is on social media. He is hilarious. He has great bookish humor that is totally relatable. He's often talking about wanting to stay in and read all day. He's absolutely a joy online. So I would suggest if you don't read it, at least follow him online. He's great. Is this my last one?
This is your final pick.
Okay. My last one is a young adult book called Illuminae. And it's by two authors, Amy Kaufman and Jake Kristoff. And the way I sell this book to people is that this is the book that gave me nightmares. So, but it's not that scary, honestly. I'll tell you why it gave me a nightmare. So I enjoy zombie movies. I love a zombie movie. I love a zombie book. My fear about zombies is the fast zombies, the quick zombies, because I don't like running. And to me, if that ever happened here, I'd be like, okay, I'm dead. I'm done. I knew I wouldn't be able to survive, and that's what scares me. But this book has that in it, and I'll tell you, it's about a book. It's a book about two characters, a young girl and a young boy, who their planet gets attacked. It gets bombed by some corporation ship. This is way in the future. It's 5024 or something ridiculous. So their planet gets attacked by some big corporation ships for some resource reason. So they escape on some refugee ships. And while they're out in space on these refugee ships, something happens that this big plague, people get sick, they turn into zombies, and not the slow, dumb kind. They are the fast, incredibly smart zombies. So they are in this ship, a contained thing in space, running from zombies, but that's not the only thing. They're also, the ship is also incredibly smart and also incredibly evil. So the AI plays a part in it too. And another reason I really enjoy recommending this book is because it's told in, it also plays with format in the sense that they use emails, text back and forth between the characters, emails between the characters that are part of the corporation. There's also some sort of court happening, trial. So they use court documents. They also use a description of the surveillance footage. So you have someone describing what they're watching in a surveillance footage. So as she's running away from the zombies, this person's describing there's another one coming across from her. She can't see it quite yet. So you see it unfolding. They don't quite see it. This is also an incredibly fast-paced read. Like, I read this in a couple days. So if you have someone that really isn't into reading, but kind of would be if it was like easy, like a quick read, I think this would really draw people in. My husband doesn't like to read, and he read this with me, and he loves it. And it's a trilogy, so there's two more, and there's a novella as well that goes in this series. And it's a really good series. It extends past that. But I think like if you like 2001 Space Odyssey, that sort of like smart machine AI stuff, you might be into this too. If you're into zombies, of course, Walking Dead, that sort of thing. This would definitely fall into that category.
Sounds quite prescient today.
Yes.
We've had a pandemic, we have AI on the horizon. We don't have zombies yet, but I guess the emphasis is on yet. You guys want to ask some questions?
I do have a suggestion for the person that did Grampus. I think there is a book called Clown in a Cornfield that kind of falls into it. It's a trilogy at this point, I think. The last one, I think, just got released. Incredibly, well, I wouldn't say it's funny, but like the premise is kind of different, and it's about clowns in a cornfield. But it is very violent, but I think it might fall into that category, so you might want to look it up. I forget the author, though. Anna and the Apocalypse. Noted. I don't think I've seen that one, so I'll have to watch it.
And a musical.
Oh, I think I have that. He said Anna and the Apocalypse is a great film. It's about zombies, and it is also a musical, which, yes, I'm there for. I will be looking that up tonight. Thank you.
Anybody else need some horrific suggestions for your lives? I do have a suggestion for you if you want to try as an entry point. Grady Hendrix, My Best Friend's Exorcism. My selling point is the power of Phil Collins compels you. Oh, thank you so much for sharing these fantastic reads with us tonight. And our final guest for the hot seat is the one, the only Leslie Case. I always want to add an H. It's not right. No. She is joining us from the back of the room. Has to take the longest walk to get up here.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It's wonderful to see all of your beautiful faces. I'm used to just seeing the back of your heads from the booth. You all have wonderful hair, but I like seeing your faces too.
Yeah. So Leslie, what do you have for us tonight? I hear you wanted to talk about mysteries, thrillers, maybe some true crime.
Yeah, so I'm here to talk about mystery thrillers, and so I am also a fan of horror, and so if you have anyone who might be interested in horror, mystery thrillers, they're brothers. They're close to each other. If you have someone who likes horror, they might also like mystery thriller. So whenever I was a kid, and now, I have an incredibly short attention span. And I could never, I almost never read books all the way through. It broke my mother's heart. My mother was a librarian until she retired. And my entire childhood, she would hand me books about dragons. I was like, Mom, I don't care about dragons. And I just thought for the longest time that I wasn't a reader. I was just not interested in books. I guarantee you that anyone that thinks that way simply has never found their genre. Because once I found my genre, I am such a reader. And so that's why I wanted to talk about mystery thriller, because if you have someone in your life that has a really short attention span and you've heard the advice, maybe give them short stories. I have tried to pick up so many short story compilations. I have read the first story in those books and never touched it again. Don't give short story compilations to people with short attention spans. Give them mystery thriller novels.
Give them fast-paced books.
Yeah.
That's really what they need. They need something that'll hook their attention on the first page and keep it, no lag in the middle, keep it until the very last page.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be short. It just has to be fast. So, I'm here to tell you about my first, it's more of an author suggestion than it is a book suggestion, because everyone I know who reads this author reads all of this author. Once you pick up one, you're like, well, I can't, I'm ruined for every other author. I need to read every single book this person has written before I can pick up another book. And that author is Riley Sager. My first suggestion under Riley Sager's umbrella is called The Only One Left. And this book is about a woman at the twilight of her life who in her youth was suspected of murdering her entire family. And there's a rhyme about her and everything. And she is at the end of her life, and a young woman comes to be her in-home health aide. And she lives in a huge mansion on the side of a cliff, and all of a sudden, mysterious and weird things start happening, and the mystery unravels, and there are so many twists in this book, you will need to go to the chiropractor afterwards. It's fantastic. My other one, or I have two more by Riley Sager. These are all like entry points for Riley Sager. Once again, if you give someone a Riley Sager book, they're gonna want the rest of them. This one is my personal favorite of Riley Sager's. It's called Home Before Dark, and it is about a young woman whose family died, or her father, pardon me, died, and left her a house. And this house they moved into when she was a girl. And they moved out of it 2 weeks later because it was haunted, just like Amityville Horror. But unlike Amityville Horror, they never sold the house. And so this house stayed as their property, and it was passed on to this daughter, who goes back to the house, which she hated, and she is going to clear it out and sell it. But guess what starts happening when she moves back in to clean it out? All sorts of spooky and weird stuff, and the mystery unravels, so many twists, you need a chiropractor. The last one that I'm going to talk about by Riley Sager as well is The Last Time I Lied. And this one is about a young girl who, whenever she was in probably junior high, attended a summer camp, and her 3 bunkmates went missing and were never found. She returns to that summer camp as an adult to be an art counselor, but she has ulterior motives because she is determined to figure out what happened to her 3 bunkmates. And the mystery unravels. So many twists and turns. You'll feel so dizzy. Anyway, that's Riley Sager. Highly recommend.
So it's definitely probably a good suggestion for people who've read every single James Patterson, love how fast and quick his books move, but are tired of the repeat plots.
Yeah. And I have read so many mystery thrillers, and there are some authors where I can predict what the ending's going to be. I have never been able to call what's going to happen in a Riley Sager book. Every single time I'm surprised.
And there's a new one every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got a good publishing deal. Anyway, I was also told that it might be useful to be able to suggest something for our youth readers. So I have a teen mystery thriller that just came out recently. It's called That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. And this one I just recently finished, very much enjoyed it. It is 2 parallel stories. One is following a young woman who turns up on a country road with amnesia. She cannot remember who she is, where she came from, or what she was doing, but she has been in a horrific accident, and she is picked up by a police officer and then she is found by a man who tells her that he is her father, and she is taken home to him, but something feels a little off the whole time she's with him. And then the parallel story is about a teenage boy who is suspected of murdering his girlfriend who went missing 5 weeks earlier. And those 2 storylines, I guess they're not parallel. What do you call this? Where it's they start apart, intersecting?
Converging.
Converging storylines, I like that. Get those 10-cent words in there. The converging storylines at the very end. And it has lots of twists. It's an easy read, great for teenage readers.
Nice. I think that one sounds like a lot of fun to add to my TBR. I don't read a lot of mystery thrillers. I don't know why.
Hey, if it's not your genre, it's not your genre. Just like the dragons weren't my genre, Mom. I can't read about any more dragons.
You and the dragon.
I don't like them. I mean, I like them. I don't like reading about them.
Yeah. Did you have kind of like a curveball in your suggestions you wanted to share with us?
So we have not talked about any books really tonight for very young readers. I say, get them started on the mystery thrillers early, right? So there is a book by an author named John Klassen, and it's called I Want My Hat Back. It is a picture book. It is about a bear who has lost his hat. And he, like any good protagonist in a mystery thriller, takes it upon himself to unravel this mystery. He seeks his hat. He eventually finds his hat. And there are swift and dire consequences for the perpetrator. That's also part of a Hat trilogy by the same author, John Klassen. So if you have a young reader who enjoyed I Want My Hat Back, there are 2 other books that are companion books to that one.
That one sounds so good.
And the illustrations are adorable.
I'm always down for an anthropomorphic story in any way, shape, or form I can. And there's so many like young ones in our lives that we need to get them hooked on books.
Don't try to give them dragon books then. I'm just kidding. There are probably lots of kids out there that love the dragon books.
Especially if they like tacos.
Sure.
As a book. See, she doesn't like dragons. So true, so true. You got anything else for me?
I do. Okay, so I really love reading fiction. I hate reading nonfiction. Sorry, Diana. I love listening to nonfiction. So I would like to recommend this next book as an audiobook specifically. If you have someone in your life who may be a little bit too busy to sit down and read a book, but would love to pop in a pair of headphones while they're washing their dishes or vacuuming their floors and listen to a good nonfiction book, I suggest Devil's Knot, The True Story of the West Memphis Three. And this book came out quite a few years ago now, and it is about a horrific, I would say, series of crimes that happened in the, I want to say, late 1980s. It was the zenith of what is considered the Satanic Panic here in America. And it takes place in West Memphis, Arkansas, which is a border city with Memphis, Tennessee, much like Kansas City and Kansas City, Kansas, except they got West on their border town's name, so it's not as confusing. And there was a horrific murder of 3 very young boys. These young boys were murdered and dumped in a creek, and the discovery of their bodies shocked this town like you would expect, right? And they were looking for someone to blame. And it almost sounds like I'm describing fiction, but remember, this is a true story. The investigators in this town zeroed in on 3 teenage boys because they wore black and listened to Metallica. And they, I want to say, manufactured the case against these 3 young men. And this is one of those true crime stories that I have not stopped thinking about. And this book is a fantastic introduction to it because there have been more developments in this story since this book was published, and there is a resolution at the end of the overarching story of the West Memphis Three. It may not be quite as satisfying as you want it to be, but at least it's a resolution.
Yeah, True life isn't always as satisfying as a good Riley Sager book.
Agreed.
You want another true crime suggestion for yourself?
I do, always.
So The Untold Lives of the Victims of Jack the Ripper, Haley Rubenhold. It's a phenomenal true crime book because
Is this the one that focuses on the victims?
focuses on the victims. Jack the Ripper does not get a sentence,
No.
does not get a mention anywhere in this book because it's reclaiming the women's stories as themselves and not just as another victim.
Yeah, I think that happened. Finding a true crime book that really focuses on telling the victims' stories is always it's so nice because oftentimes, especially in America, we talk about really horrific criminals in an almost like
Idolizing fashion?
Yeah, idolizing way, and we should not be idolizing Ted Bundy. Like, come on, people. And so it's always good to see and hear about, true crime stories that really focus on being an advocate for the victims and telling their story and not just the killer's story.
Yeah. Do you guys want to ask this lovely lady, Leslie, some questions about true crime or mystery thriller suggestions that she should give you?
Or like hair products, or like where I got my pants.
How do the microphones work? You know, those kinds of questions. If not, we have one.
Yes, darling.
What about true crime criminals of old, like Al Capone and other criminals of, I guess, the 30s and times past?
So I'm not as into mafia true crime as a lot of people are. It is it's a big deal out there. And so off the top of my head, I cannot think of any mafia true crime. But let me tell you, I'm more than certain that there have been numerous books written about Al Capone specifically. And they are likely fantastic audiobooks as well. And so do you have any off the top of your head?
The only thing that's coming to my mind right now is Capote Does My Shirts, which is a children's book about when Capone does my shirts, when Al Capone is in Alcatraz and in jail. And it's about the jail warden's son and his experience with Al Capone ironing and doing his laundry, which as like a kid's story is like so tongue-in-cheek and so funny because he's like a mob boss, but he's doing your laundry. So in all honesty, that's the only thing that came to my brain initially. But what I will strongly suggest is please submit a gift shelf help, and I will happily do a little bit of research for you, and pull together at least 10 fabulous books about that period.
And if they follow the QR code that is in the pamphlet, will they find the shelf help link there, or is it just the...
You'll have to go to our website, unfortunately. I didn't think to add that QR code.
You'll find it. I got faith in you.
Yes.
I've got one more question from online. This person was also apologetic because it was not technically a book question, but they were asking if you had any true crime podcast recommendations.
Do I have true crime podcast recommendations? Do you have all night? My very favorite true crime podcast is a podcast called My Favorite Murder. It is two women who got together, they found each other at a party, and one of them was telling the story of a murder that she had recently heard about, and most people were like shying away and being like, this isn't for me. And the other woman was drawn in like a magnet, and they found each other, and they found that they had this shared appreciation of true crime, and they started a podcast together, and they call it a true crime comedy podcast. Now, a lot of people think that true crime and comedy do not go together, and on certain levels, you are correct, but the best way that I have ever heard them describe it is, we don't think that murder is funny. We just think we are funny. And so they process and tell each other these true crime stories, and they process their shock and grief and everything like that through comedy. And so it's my very favorite true crime podcast. There are also great single story true crime podcasts out there. Dateline has a fantastic collection of single story true crime podcasts where they'll do a 10-episode arc on a single story. And so look up Dateline's ones if you want something more serious and in-depth.
And if you don't mind a little bit of horror in your life, the Archive 81 podcast is an investigative structure to a podcast that revolves around a mysterious disappearance. And there may or may not be some cultish underpinnings,
Ooh.
which is also just delightful.
Love cultish underpinnings.
Diana also wants to tell us about
Diana,
her.
get up on that microphone. Come here and I'll give you mine.
I also want to give a shout out to a podcast that's not about murder, but still about true crime, which is Scam Goddess by Lacey Mosley. She is an actress and comedian who is like your favorite comedian's actress and comedian. She's had everybody from Conan O'Brien to Guy Brennan, tons of famous comedians on her podcast, and she's about to be on a new TV show. So she'll be in the news a lot more, but she talks about scams and cons and the people who commit them, and it's hilarious, but it also, for a while, I had to stop listening to murder podcasts. It was just too heavy. So I found Scam Goddess, and it was still that same true crime itch, but it's a lot easier to laugh sometimes about idiots who try to pull cons and don't succeed, or sometimes people who pull cons and do succeed. But I really recommend that one. Sorry.
Thank
That
you,
was
Diana.
wonderful.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, comments, or suggestions of the night?
Okay, one more. This was an author that we had come and speak at the library a few years ago, and he wrote a book called The Feather Thief. It's really hard to say out loud. Oh, hey, we got some fans. It is one of the most interesting true crime heist books that you have ever read in your life. It's narrative nonfiction, is what Diana tells us. It's about this young lad who breaks into a British museum to steal taxidermied birds of paradise. That's all I'm going to tell you about it, because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's fascinating.
Thank you, Leslie.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank everyone for coming out tonight.
Yeah, I hope you had as much fun as I did getting all these books to add to my to be read and to be shopped for and checked out from the library lists. We greatly appreciate you guys spending your night with us.
Thank you.